Olá, bom dia, bem-vindos a mais um evento, mais uma roda de conversa da Muda no Kultursymposium. Hoje a gente vai conversar sobre moeda, o que que é uma moeda, moedas sociais e economia. Temos aqui convidados incríveis. Antes de começar, passar a bola para os nossos convidados, eu queria falar um pouquinho sobre esse evento e sobre a Muda. Então, esse evento, mais um evento da participação
Is
da Muda no
the
Kultursymposium.
participation of Muda Symposia, that's a partnership with Muda and the Goethe Institute of Rio. In this event, we have already done lots of events, some talks like safety food, some theater plays. But today we would like to have this talk about economy and trustee, and then we will have another symposium speaking of Muda and all this experience to be in this symposium. And here today, our guests, we have here Friederike Habermann, Ranulfo, and TATIANA ROQUE, and we will talk about currencies. Muda is a net that has its own currency that works, trying other economies based on happiness. We talk a little about the power. It's not a new economy, but it's another economy. We've been using this mechanism through sharing, exchanging, which is not something new. We're just rescuing this here in Brazil and Africa. So we are reconnecting to this essence of this ancestor to think of the economy, to rethink of this monetary system. So it's very important to be here with those people to start to think of how those tools are involved in this trust, in this exchange among the communities who we live with. So to start this conversation, I would like to call here TATIANA ROQUE. She's the Secretary of Science and Technology of the City of Rio, professor at the Mathematics Institute of the Federal University. She teaches at the postgraduate program in Teaching and History of Science and Philosophy at the same university, author of several books on the science and society. And her most recent work is The Day We Returned from Mars, a history of science and power with clues to a new present. So thank you for being here. I would like to hear a little bit more about your journey, how you work with this currency, how you have started thinking of economy in this construction of alternative economies. So thank you, Flavia. First, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of your initiative of Muda, but I really support your project. In my presentation, I'm here much more as a vice president of this project Renda Básica, which is basic revenue income. This basic income has been very active in this project in Rio de Janeiro, in Rio. We have lots of initiatives, and this Brazilian project, there will be, we also have a social coin currency in Niterói, which is a city in Rio, but now the same group will have a new secretary here in our city hall of science and technology, of solidarity, economy, and one of the projects is to have a social coin, social currency, which will be called the samba. And it's been very successful here. And the principle of this social currency is linked to the basic income, which is something that is very interesting. So how does it work? You guarantee a basic income to all the population of all the region, and this basic income comes in a card, and this card is the coins, the money, and then you have agreements with the local people, so then they can have discounts if they pay with this card. So then people can have this basic income and will invest this basic income in the local community, in the local merchant. So it's a gain or win and win game for the local development. So that's why you have the social currency to see the economy as a circulation that it will help the development of the territory through its specific characteristics, bringing cultures, the singularities of the population itself, taking into consideration this process, especially financial economy. I'd like also to link this with some studies, philosophies. Some historian people have brought this currency history, that this view that is a common sense, that the currency came up to exchange things. No, it's not true. In the past, people would exchange things. Then you have your coin, your currency, but it wasn't exactly like this. It was not the money itself. It came up through those theories from the taxes. So the big hand of the state, when they collected taxes, so they created this currency. So there is a relation of power clearly involved. There is a historian that talks about this power of the currency. When you bring this currency to the place, you will continue having this public spirit with the government, but without this view of a state very well centralized, that sometimes can be very hard, it can be very severe. So that's the relation that I would like to bring between basic income, the coin itself, the currency, and the commons. So that's the commons that we have, that it happens much more locally. That's why the social currency is very important as a political instrument. That's what you have already been doing at Muda. So we can think of a perspective, so how it can be something like bigger. So that these are my first considerations, and then we will go back to the debate. So thank you. It already opens the talk where we can touch many points of this construction. So let's continue listening to the other speakers, because it will sum up much more. Then I would like to call Friederike Habermann, that is a research economist, historian. She's a German activist. She has been an activist for some decades. She's the author of some books. She's very much concerned about lots of things such as racism and the other attributes of the society. So Friederike, welcome. Thank you for being here with us. I really hope that you can understand well with our translation. I'd like to hear a little bit more about your journey, about those like works that you have been doing.
Yes, thank you for this encompassing introduction. My first starting point, I think, was when I was a child, and I saw people starving on TV, and I wondered why, because obviously there have been, and there still are, enough resources in this world. And yeah, so I became what I am today, economist and activist. And yeah, related to activism, maybe I'd like to mention that in the 90s, I was with the Zapatista International Network, and we started the Alter Globalization Movement, People's Global Action, and Spanish Acción Global de los Pueblos. And the Movimiento Sem Terra has been part of it, and from all parts of the world, really very marginalized movements have been part. And I learned from them that they never ask for money. They ask for other logics of doing economy. And also maybe in my books, the very first book was on Chiapas and the International of Hope, but the second then was on Argentina, about the alternative economies after the financial crisis. And here as well, for example, you had trueques, to use the Spanish word, because let's system in the English is something like slightly different, with 7 million people participating, but you had inflation, you had fraud, you had pretty much problems of money in the mainstream society. And I started to sympathize more and more with commons-based and commons-creating solutions. It took me a long time to understand what this is, but of course with People's Global Action already, I understood that I had been in contact with the logic of commoning, which is the opposite maybe as the logic of exchange logic. And as TATIANA already said, the history is not that individuals have been exchanging stuff. There has been never a society where that had been encountered, where people did this, maybe one tribe with another tribe or something, but not in the same society, because this started mistrust. And still, you have in all the economy books, you have this fairy tale of that people always have been exchanging with exchange logic. And even Yanis Varoufakis, who's a famous economist and used to be the financial minister of Greece with a left-wing government, but a very famous critique of capitalism as well, he has the story in his book, How I Explain the Economy to My Daughter, saying the first ancestors of ours who first exchanged an apple to a banana formed a first market. And this is not the case, because if I have the banana and you have the apple and you want my banana, I can give it to you, then it's a gift, but I might be hungry. So I say I want the apple. That is an exchange based on needs. That's perfectly fine, has always been like this. But if I say, no, if I do it like a market, this would mean I would say, no, my banana is twice worth as much as your apple. So I break it in halves. And whether I eat, you get one half, and whether I eat the other half, or whether I throw it away here in the dust in front of you, it's not of your business, because your apple is not worth enough to say something to the other part of the banana. And if I have a whole pile of bananas, then my stomach is going to I have a pain because I eat so much. And or if you have not even one apple, then you have nothing, then all my bananas go rotten. And this is the logic why I've seen people starving, and why we see people starving these days. Every single day since I'm thinking about this, and this is 50 years more or less, there have been tens of thousands of people starving for this logic. And this had been introduced with a liberal market, with a money system on a global scale. And yes, Tatiana, what you just said, that reminded me of the analysis debate of what Earl Grey said when they conquered Africa. He said to make the black people work on the plantages, we have to take the land away and then we have to raise taxes, because they couldn't survive on their own, and they had to get money somehow, so they had to go to work to do this. And yes, if I have the bananas, then everybody else has nothing, then everybody else has to think about what can they work for me? Giving me a massage or whatever. And this puts people under pressure to do something they would not do intrinsically. This puts pressure. This means alienation. This means living in a society of structural hate, how I call it, because if one gets the job to give me a massage, the others don't get it anymore. And all this is so completely different with what other possibilities of creating economy. We must understand that this is a very new way, and that it is constructed because maybe it wasn't a conscious way to do it, but it emerged because it served to privileges and to make it so in such a complicated way that it seemed legitimated. And we have more problems. I cannot go now into deeper, but we have the coercion to grow. The economy has to grow all the time with money, because if we compete among each other, then the one who has the economies of scale, who can produce more, is cheaper, so the other one has to grow as well. We have the structure constraint, you say, you must, the enterprises are forced to exploit any resources as much as possible, be it the nature, be it animals, be it human beings, because the more they can do this, the cheaper they are. And so you have all these effects with money we do not want. So I stop here, the rest maybe in the discussion.
Uau! Uau, você já tocou assim, né, que em pontos.
You have touched some points for our discussion here, this relation with the trust. I really like the term that you have used to start thinking of the exploration and the other things that you have used. So I really would like to say again, to mention them again in the end, and started thinking of the possibilities, because the problem is there. I really would like to talk about the solutions. How can we change this reality? So going on here with our presentations, I would like to hear from Ranulfo. He's the co-founder of Cambiatus. He has post graduation, and he also works with money itself, like building monetary systems. So please, can you talk a little bit more about your work? It's very good.
E sinto que tem bastante alinhamento de ideias e também creio da parte prática, né? E então, se me permite, eu gostaria de fazer uma apresentação, mostrar aquela apresentação que eu enviei aí, não sei se é possível. Se não, eu compartilho aqui na minha tela. Isso. Então, eu vou começar com esse tema de moeda, né? Para mim, moeda é sinônimo de dinheiro, né? Então, vamos falar um pouco do que é a moeda em si, né? Então, eu vou fazer uma analogia com frutas e depois eu retorno ao tema da moeda em si, ou do dinheiro em si. Poderia adiantar, por favor, mais um? Então, dependendo de quem define o que é moeda, o que é dinheiro, essa pessoa ela pode estar levando a definição para atender os seus interesses comerciais. Essa é uma coisa importante. Então, eu vou mostrar uma definição de fruta, né? Vocês vão ver que é uma definição totalmente equivocada, porque vocês todos conhecem fruta, ok? Então, por favor, o próximo. Por exemplo, fruta, né? Essa é uma definição errada, viesada aos interesses e comerciantes, produtores e comerciantes de banana. Eles dizem assim, olha só, fruta é um tipo de banana. E existem 3 tipos de frutas, nanica, da terra e São Tomé. Só que vocês conhecem o que é fruta, o que são frutas, e sabem que tem laranja, tem melancia, tem uva, jabuticaba, manga, carambola, entre outras mais. Né? Acontece que se vocês não conhecessem, vocês simplesmente estivessem confiando nessa definição, quem definiu isso estaria super contente porque vocês estariam consumindo banana que nem louco. Né? Na manhã, na tarde, na noite, snacks, onde quer que seja. Né? Agora, por favor, o próximo. Agora, eu coloquei aqui uma definição que eu achei que era, os botânicos que me perdoem, né? Então, a fruta é uma parte de um vegetal que possui diferentes níveis de açúcares, vitaminas e que é obtida de certas plantas silvestres ou cultivadas. Algumas são comestíveis pelos seres humanos e também por outros seres vivos. Então, essa definição abrange jabuticaba, já abrange laranja, abrange banana, abrange várias coisas, né? Muito bem, agora vamos ao tópico central. O que é moeda, o que é dinheiro? Né? Então, vamos mostrar uma definição viesada aos interesses de instituições que são autorizadas a endividar pessoas, a endividar governos, a endividar negócios, né? Que são essas aí, são bancos de investimento, bancos comerciais, cooperativas de investimento ou de crédito, como as pessoas chamam, né? Então, a definição que é viesada a esses interesses foi publicada em 2014 pelo Banco Central da Inglaterra. Por favor, próximo. Então, aí está. Próximo, por favor. Então, eles definem assim, que dinheiro é um tipo de eu devo a você. Ok? E, segundo eles, existem 3 tipos de dinheiro. O dinheiro na forma de bilhetes ou moedas metálicas, né? Esse que a pessoa mais vê. Isso representa, no total, menos de 3% de tudo que é gerado, né? Dentro de um sistema financeiro tradicional. Depósitos bancários, que já vão entender o que é essa coisa de depósito bancário, e reservas do Banco Central. Agora, o ponto central isso aqui é viesado a eles. Por quê? Ao interesse deles, porque isso, se as pessoas aceitam, se as pessoas não conhecem aquele dinheiro, elas tomam isso como, poxa, isso daí é verdade 100% e eu aceito. Então, quer dizer que para eu ter dinheiro, eu tenho que me endividar, eu tenho que recorrer a um empréstimo, alguma coisa do tipo, né? E assim por diante. Além de trabalhar, mas se me aparece alguma situação, emergência, eu tenho que me endividar. E isso beneficia esse tipo de negócio. Ok. Próximo, por favor. Então, eles dizem também nesse outro artigo que a maioria do dinheiro é criado na forma de depósitos bancários, os quais são criados pelos bancos comerciais. Mas vamos ver o que é essa coisa chamada depósitos. Alguém deposita algo? Esse termo é um termo muito tricky, é muito enganoso, né? E o professor, o próximo, por favor. E o professor Carol Quigley, ele no seu livro chamado Tragedy in Hope, ele faz uma coisa, um trabalho brilhante isso daí. Eu recomendo quem tiver paciência e tempo para ler, né? Então ele fala muito claramente que essa palavra depósito ela é uma palavra ilusória, porque na realidade os bancos criam quando alguém assina um contrato se endividando, né? E isso foi comprovado recentemente na prática por meio de um estudo científico. O próximo, por favor. Pelo professor Richard Verne, da Universidade de Southampton, nesse trabalho, Can Banks Individually Create Money out of Nothing? Então, ele faz um experimento e aí mostra na prática que isso realmente eles criam a partir do nada, né? Então, ok, muito bem. já entendemos como é que se cria essa coisa, mas agora já sabemos que essa definição de dinheiro é um tipo de dívida é viesada, está equivocada. Ela serve para atender interesses comerciais de instituições que são autorizadas a endividar pessoas, governos e outras, e seja lá mais quem for. Muito bem, agora próximo, por favor. Agora, existem razões para isso? Bom, próximo, por favor. Existem razões para que as pessoas não entendam? Então, aí tem várias possíveis, né? Será porque, não sabendo disso, elas não conseguem entender como que o sistema financeiro facilita ações criminais através de derivativos e outras coisas do tipo, bem explicado nesse trabalho do Stephen Platt, né? Ou próximo, por favor. Ou porque é um mercado que movimenta só por dia em torno de 6 trilhões de dólares. Né? Então, de repente, será que não é interessante que as pessoas desconheçam como isso é criado?
Is it interesting?
É bastante lucrativo, né? 6 trilhões de dólares por dia é uma grana legal.
This is a very big money. Next, please. You can go on. Later, if you want to see these details, here's the presentation.
Pelo tempo, não vou falar mais disso daqui, mas depois a gente fala.
I'm going to talk more about this. Next, please.
Vamos ver uma definição.
Now, let's see a definition that has no bias. This definition was inspired by Bernard Lietaer. It was a brilliant definition. He's a great economist, historian. He understood the history of money very good. He was very good. Let's go to the next, please. He also said, I had the opportunity to talk to him sometimes, and he said, money is a tool that should serve us rather than be our master. And since money is a human construct, it should be rethought, reimagined, and redesigned. And I'm 100% agreeing to him in a work that I'm doing with Cambiatus and other areas. Next, please. So money, my wife and I published a book about money in 2015, and we adapted a definition based in the work of Bernard Lietaer. Money is an agreement made by a community that decides to accept something standardized that serves at least as a medium of exchange. There are a lot of kinds of money doing a lot of functions. Next, please. In this process, other people know that are in the government realized that Governor Jerry Brown in 2014, he brought a law that benefited the traditional bankers. And in this law, he said that Bitcoins was the official money of California. Next, please.
So if you want to take a look at it, I will leave the presentation here. So we are now talking of California in the United States. And now let's talk about the Marshall Islands that are near Australia. This country has become a former colony of the United States. I think in the 70s, it was still a colony of the United States. I might be wrong, but I'm not sure. And then in 2014, they decided to have their own money to meet their national sovereignty. Next, please. Here we have Fiji, Marshall Islands. Next, please. And then when it was a colony of the United States, there was a there was Bikini Atoll, there were lots of nuclear bombs that exploded just for tests, so it was a crazy thing, it was a waste of money. But then what happened in this atoll is that it recovered through times because it has several processes. And through this financial system that is screwed, that is bad, to survive, it has to have lots of kinds of money. And it is not only created through that. It can never be like this. If there is an economist that says that it has to be done like this, no, you have to say that it's not possible. Next, please. And here, this brilliant woman, Hilda Heine, she was the president of Marshall Islands. And then she said, okay, let's create our own currency because we wanted to use our own technology to be transparent so that we don't need to have debt, to have our own money. So then it will be something that will not break because technology doesn't let this happen. And then we have the International Monetary Fund that defends the financial institutions that don't want that to happen and start saying lots of things. They speak of instability, but it's all bullshit. Don't believe in that because we've been seeing lots of banks that are going down, that are going bankruptcy in Europe. So so they need to improve. So they can't just break some legitimate things that is creating their own money with innovative things that stops corruption, for example, inequality, and the other things. So I'm almost finishing. And then there are lots of initiatives in the world. The oldest one is the one called the OVIR, which is very cool, and also Muda in Rio de Janeiro, also in Costa Rica. There is another one that's called the Montes Verdes, and during the pandemic, it was screwed because lots of people lost their jobs, and they then created a local currency, and that's how they survived. Next one, please. And what do they have in common? All those complementary currencies. We have Muda, then the next one, Verdes, here in Costa Rica. And here they are created. What do they have in common? That those complementary currencies are created by people through actions that benefit society, nature. And those agreements are thought from people. You don't need the government, you don't need an intelligent person that will say, oh, you have to do it. No, you do it. And then you create those agreements depending on your culture, your framework. And it provides financial resilience to people. For example, here in Costa Rica, the official money is colon. During the pandemic, it was gone. We had to reduce a lot. And then there were verdes, so then they had exchange, like clothes, food, and all those currencies use the platform with technology called the blockchain. And the last one, please, Cambiatus, speak a little bit of it, is a collaborative project that aims at helping people to understand better what money is. Just like it makes people understand that money is not debt, and they also create its complementary currency. Like a union, for example, a credit union, you have the clients, the people that are members, people get service, but when it's collaborative, you have the service providers, they are their owners. They participate in these responsibilities, in the resources. So some part of it also goes to the client. And just to finish, I like this sentence, and I really hope you like it too. So that's it. So thank you for the time. I know it was a little bit longer. Thank you, Ranulfo. It's very nice to hear and understand from your speech the importance of the narrative, what currency is Tatiana started bringing, how people think of this exchange, how wrong people are about this exchange. Also, the taxes that are there to justify the presence of their money. Frederick has also mentioned the liberal logic and how it affects the trust, how this logic is taking us to several issues, and also Ranulfo finishing talking about money as a debt. So we can think that we can have several currencies. We don't need to have the centralized currencies of the state. So I would like to have a debate now to try to connect all those systems, the trust, because when I started thinking of this topic, trust, then I really thought of the Brazilian scenario, not only Brazilian, but also worldwide. So if we think of some data, for example, in Brazil, white people get 70% more than black people. So we have to think of the gender. Like men get 30% more than women, putting the black women in the basis in a position of like having the worst compensation. Also the genocide of black young people, every 23 minutes, a black young person is killed. So how can we think, and if we can't trust the state to guarantee our own safety? Like last year, Brazil was back to the map of hunger. So when I started thinking of safety and also trust and the economy, I really thought of the lack of trust that we have regarding states, institutions to guarantee our basic rights such as houses, food, and lots of populations in communities are explored. So Frederick talked a lot about this exploration. So I'd like to know from you about how can you think of alternative things, or how can they affect and reestablish this trust that lots of people don't have? So I also invite people that are on YouTube. We are here interacting. So if you have questions during the debate, we will open to Q&A session. So it's open here. Anyone can contribute, and also for the solutions, which tools we can invest. So why are we investing in those tools to change the scenario that we have seen? I'd like to speak briefly something that we have already mentioned. That's the trust is directly linked to democracy. We've been talking a lot about this crisis, but democracy cannot be something abstract. What you said, Flavia, we have to understand what the concrete democracy is. And also the territory, the local itself, the place itself, then those things become more concrete. They are not so abstract. Even when we talk about economy, involvement, democracy, participation, everything is related to the place, to the territory, cities, for this recovery of this trust that you have just mentioned, which is crucial. That I'm done. I will speak a little bit. I also agree that when we reestablish those networks in those places, but regarding democracy, I see that it can be better ruled if people have a better knowledge, like who they will vote for, what they will decide. We lived. Actually, we've been living, I think, 300 years in a system that is centralized. Lots of decisions are like from the top to the bottom. And now we have tools that enable us to make decisions, like exchanges of values, without the need of being intermediates, if people learn more about the benefits of it and how can take better decisions, which is not so difficult. Inside a collective place or interrelated collective places, for example, Muda has received a representative of the social currency from Ethiopia, another project that we support, and then it will also come to Costa Rica. So I really hope that we can go there and you can come here. So it's important. The place is important, so is the connection. So it enriches people to think more about it, how to create, how to develop solutions for lots of issues, and how to think of better arrangements of agreements, like social arrangements to manage the resources that are under your responsibility.
Okay. Well, to say bluntly, when I criticized the money in the first round, I did not even criticize how money comes into this world these days, how the banks are giving the credits. I have not even criticized interest rates, which are a problem. I have not even criticized the exploitation of the surplus from the workers. I have only criticized aspects that you have with any money, and this includes alternative money too. I'm not saying instead we should use official money, but of course we need to have in mind that inflation, losing trust, etc., in alternative currencies can be there too. I very much agree as a solution in what Tatiana said. The solution is democracy. So of course we cannot decide in our life circumstances, let's get rid of money completely. Although in my loose community, so we try to do this. So we are not thinking with, we're not living with exchange logic among us. And we're trying to open our structures as well as much as possible to the outside, like having a free shop or other stuff. But I think we have always to try to minimize the competition. The competition is the very core of the market system. And it's the competition, as I said, that brings the compulsion to grow and grow and grow, and to exploit, especially. I mean, there's this great book by Raj Patel and Jason Moore, The History of the World in 7 Cheap Things.
Há há livro que falava sobre essas questões.
Now I have a problem. I hear the Portuguese.
Sorry, I didn't change the channel. Now I will.
Okay. Okay. Now it's working again? Okay. So showing historically how all women, all Black, how modern racism, how our modern understanding of gender has very much to do with having this world of who is profiting and who is rather used as a resources. And yes, Black women have been pretty much at the bottom of this hierarchy, but this is also to make certain lives, certain kind of work like care, etc., cheap, and to be possible to use it in the market system to make it cheaper and cheaper. And we must not preserve these logics. We must try to overcome them, and the way is democracy indeed. And even if we have, I saw in one of the videos, I saw that you have the CSA systems as well, the community supported agriculture. In Germany, we also have a network of CSX for everything. And this is so the people who are producing saying, this is how much money we are going to need to pay for whatever you have to buy or whatever. And the people who get the products, they collect the money in an anonymously way. So people have little money, they can give less than other people who have more money, and this is anonymously, so it is not like, look how much money I gave or something. And this is a quite strong way to overcome market logic. There are much more, let's say, reformist ways, but still in the same direction, like you might know the economy for the common good. They say the enterprises have to make everything very transparent so that people have not only the price system to decide, but to have more as a basis for a more democratic decision, although it's still, well, people have lots of money and other people have no money, so this is not democracy, but it is one step into this direction. So the first way, and here in Germany, we founded a network together with Commons, together with Economy for Common Good, together with Degrowth, Solidarian Economy and others, and also of other movements, care movement, climate movement. We formed a network called Network Economic Transformation. And we say we can do all these different ways to dismantle the market. Also having demands to the states, like in Germany, indeed, we have a strong movement for societization of energy, of housing, which had been unthinkable 5 years ago, I think. So this is also, and then it's not that the state should take these, but that we should find common democratic ways to regulate this. So if we dismantle the market and we don't want a centralized state to decide instead of the market, then it needs to be a society that is really democratized. And and democracy doesn't mean to vote more often. It means to create your life conditions, to co-create your life conditions. And this is nothing else but commoning, creating commons. So it's these 3 ways: dismantling the market, democratizing society, and creating commons.
Quero fazer uma pergunta para as tradutoras. É que essa palavra é tão boa, commoning.
I will do a little question. Commoning. Commoning.
Comunizar?
Comunizar. Commoning.
Não sei como as tradutoras traduziram.
What commoning is? Pode translate it?
Não, o que é, mas eu não sei como traduzir.
Yes, I understand how to translate this idea
Yeah,
of
I've been
harmony.
thinking that this might be a problem. I hope not. Well, commons is the English term. I think that should in Spanish you have sometimes it's translated as bienes comunes, but then you don't have the verb in it because people say more and more it is not the bienes, it is how we are doing it. So yeah, that's also the reason why in German we use commons and commoning, because it's hard to grasp it in the German language too.
Eu acho que em português a gente às
In
vezes
Portuguese, sometimes we can translate to the commons, but commoning, it has more relation to community, to do some things in community than just the goods. It's very famous, the tragedy of the commons. In Portuguese, we would translate tragédia dos bens comuns. How we are managing these resources of the goods, how we are managing these goods that are common to all of us. In the chat, we had a question of Astrid. Hello, Astrid. She would like to understand, you talked about that, Frederic, about this logic of commoning and of the commons, how you offer exit to the hate, of the structure hate you mentioned. Do you want to go deep in this?
Did I get it right? How to fight the structural hate?
sim, how the
Yes. How this logic how can we go against of this structure hate?
Well, it's not easy, but it shows that yeah, maybe let's think of such a community where people produce different kinds of products. If you have two people competing with each other, then you will not overcome it. If there's a way to co-create it and to do it with each other without the competition, then you're over the structural hate. And this is, I think, it's important to try to form these spaces of a different rationality, so that because we also need to learn that that it's the most normal thing in the world that we cooperate instead of competing all the time. But yes, we need also to change the structures in the small, if you cannot change it in the big, to allow us to get out of the structural hate, because otherwise we are stuck into it.
I would like to talk about it. I agree with Frederic. It's not something simple, but maybe through the experience that we see, people when are together, they come with different ideas of what is the problem that they want to solve and what they want to co-create together. The first step to solve it is to help them to see the problem in a shared way. Have the rhythms shared too, and then take the decisions to what is going to be the functioning of the economic system that they are co-creating together with a local currency or other. First is to understand the context that they are, then understand the goals that are shared, and later it's easier to see, to get in harmony of the situation. Even with that, there are people in the practice, I don't know what happens. Those people doesn't want to cooperate. They want to go to the other side, but there is a group that are together. You cannot say, okay, yes to everyone. You cannot please everyone. I just want to add that this notion of common, it's a concept that has been utilized by the theoricals for a line of the Italians or the autonomists, Italians ones. You have Dardot and Raval that worked about neoliberalism and this idea of common too. And scholars that are Latin Americans that think about the commons too that you talked about. And it's an approach, like Flavia said, it's not just a question about the commons. You have to share everything. You have to create the common. You have to create instances of the common. It is a big challenge. How we do that? This notion of the common comes to solve the problem. How you can guarantee common spaces, public spaces that are not necessarily from the state. It is from theories that see the state that is an authority. The state is not the individual. You cannot put everything in the person. So these institutions of the common can be an alternative to these two sides. You maintain the emphasis in the collective, but not via state. The notion of common is to create institutions to create the common. That's why I like this idea, commonizing it. Frederic. It's a verb. You're creating the institution. It's not something that's given. It's not the commons. It's how you create the common.
Well, that maybe I start with the strategy of the commons because it's been mentioned already. I mean, this is this image that in the European Middle Ages there had only be one part where the sheep could be put, and then all the people wanted to put as many sheep as was possible, and then the common land was destroyed. So this is called the tragedy of the commons. But even Gerhard Haden, who wrote that the compulsion to do this is there, and it's not because of the commons, it's because of the market society that there's the compulsion to grow. It's in the very article itself. And Elinor Ostrom then, who not by accident 1 year after the financial crisis has been awarded the so-called Nobel Prize for the economy and has been the first woman and a non-economist, she found that there are so many existing and functioning commons around the world because easily people they're communicating. I mean, in the normal mainstream economics, this is not happening. So they give each other rules. And I personally slightly disagree with some rules and find it, of which she found, and find it much more fruitful, like Silke Helfrich, a German commons expert who suddenly died, unfortunately. She looked for patterns in functioning commons, So like, what do people normally do if it is working? And so she found until her death, 33, and what people do. And this can help to orientate yourself to go into this direction that is trying to be very democratic in a way of a careful reciprocity. This is one of the patterns, for example. And yeah, that's common.
Eu queria trazer para o debate
I
também.
wanted to bring to the debate that listen to you and talking about democracy, the democracy beyond of voting and better and more, it has to do with co-create this life experience in these relations. And think about the common. You have to think about relations in community, what you are creating community, how you are generating and managing these resources. It came to me this question, how to identify these resources to the point of the personal thing. How Ranulfo said, the necessity to understand about why you're voting, to have this idea of how to put your idea in group, how to manage that. You have to understand about what you're talking about. You have to understand yourself too. And think about the hate logic. In what logic you are operating? So from that, you have to put yourself in community in a current way and bring our experience in Muda, what we saw when created this community. We have a community that is peer-to-peer. Anyone can come and put his or her offer. Maybe it's not easy to identify her or his offer. How the person is going to be here in the community. I felt difficult to identify my offer because we are operating a logic of market because that our value is from the outside. You need someone from outside to identify this value. We are used to wait outside force, this 10%, 20% for people that come and say the value of something. And not all people recognize our value. How you think that you can use these tools like universal income, for example, to help internal trust? How you can put yourself in this community and how this internal trust can affect the management of the commons.
I think it's difficult to give a universal answer because people start from very different points. And I suppose that it's much more difficult as long as people are completely in the mainstream structures. And I suppose we here in the rich area have much more possibilities than other areas. But as I said, I learned about commons from the most poor movements. And what is quite obvious is that, for example, in the Occupy movements, a rebellion, or here in Germany, we have lots of squatted forests that are zones of to defend them against coal mining or other environmental infrastructure projects. And what people do there is, without these structures they live usually in, is you do the most natural thing. You say, okay, we have to do this because we need food, we need housing, we need people who safeguard us, and who's doing what and how we are organizing it. And yes, and the steps, maybe if we are completely in our normal structures of having to earn, then it's much more difficult. But I think when we start, one experience of commons is that it comes into movement, that everything comes into movement, that the logics come into movement as well. Until maybe the point there are two authors from the United States, Stefan Harney and Fred Moten, and they criticize even the commons because they say the commons are something that Western individuals do because they say it's in favor of us as me, an individual as well. And they speak of undercommons as what is happening in the Black movements of ever in the Black society in the United States is something that goes beyond this individual thinking. And so I think we're not staying the same when we're changing our world. The world changes us back as well. So the answer will be very different in very different situations of the world, I think.
I would like to talk about it. I think that we are concerned about these questions, eruptions of violence that happened. At the same time, we associate that with the religions. In the Brazil, we associate that with the evangelical movement, with a little bit of prejudice. But I think that there is something that those religious movements that produced, that are spaces of belonging and approaching. So we have to think if it has not grown because of is that it's missing other spaces of commoning. This practice of bringing together, of belonging for other via. It is something to think.
Ok. Sim, são ideias bem interessantes e eu acordo que
Yes, those are ideas that are very interesting.
uma receita de bolo que
And I think that we cannot have a recipe for everything.
trata de pessoas que vão
So I think,
realidade.
since we are talking about people that decide, if you have something that is a common that people are going to manage, those people need to decide, or you do that, or you do another thing. So that to happen in a way to get the goals, those people need to understand what is happening in the space. The biggest part of those people need to have the same vision, the same perspective. I will do here a relation with the story, with the people with questions that are blind and people that are other elephants, like blinds and elephants. The blind touched the tail of the elephant, and the person thought it was like a thing to clean the house. It means that the people were blind and they were touching the elephant, they were doing things, they were managing the community, the collective, and they don't know the context, everything that they are doing. It's important to see the global context, to see the problems, how they are related. And with that, I said, people can get and improve the capacity to see the problem, to see that how something is related to another to decide. And this is crucial. If you are working in a collective, it's important if you see your goals, but you have to see the goals of the collective, the people that are with you. You have to talk to the people to do a shared goal. I saw in the practice that it worked. It has been working. There are challenges, of course. Dealing with people, you have challenges, of course. if you are dealing with one, you have challenge. Two, you have challenges. Imagine in a collective. It's very good to listen to you. In this talk, Frederic remembered me in the beginning that what was a reason for you was to see people starving in television. It remembered me the people that were starving from other places. So for that person that is starving, how is this person going to think about democracy or about decision making, that when something that is basic is being privated from this person? It's good to think that there are different things. It's good to understand as good things.
To have a different potential. So I think the universal basic income, you have to guarantee the mechanism of each person, at least in this level of having the basic rights. So this way we can start thinking of democracy as an effective way. So everybody will have education and at least the basic rights. And then we can learn how to generate those common resources. So this movement of currencies that bring this dimension of being in another place, being in your own places, at the resources that we share together, how we are going to manage all those things and not to wait for the one that is centralized, not wait only for the state to do it. The social currencies bring this dimension, this power to communities that can sustain themselves. And that's what we said in the beginning. So it's very rich. So I would like to open to some final considerations, and I will also take a look at the chat to see if there is some questions, if there are some questions. So, but I would like to hear from you something. I'd like to thank that it was an honor. It was very nice meeting Frederic. Ranulfo, I just knew him by name, so Flavia was a great mediator, wonderful mediator, brought up lots of questions to trigger this debate. So I'm here available not only to debate, but also to build these commons.
Yes, thanks for this really great talk. I really liked it very much. And yeah, maybe referring the last bit to what you, Flavia, said, speaking from a country in a very privileged situation, and also referring to the question, how do we get to the commons? It is democracy, but it must be democracy that is always going beyond as well. Because if we do democracy in Germany, Germans will certainly decide to keep the privileges we have. So it is always about unlearning privileges as well, and we have to encounter each other and others to become a real democratic and needs-based society. Thank you.
Eu também agradeço pela
I also would like to thank for the opportunity. It was an honor to meet, to meet Frederic, Tatiana, and also the idea that you have brought. It was very nice. I also have, there is a sentence, actually an idea. We talk of commons, but it's important, in my opinion, that money money should also be some like good common. We have to take it out of these institutions that develop money to benefit their interests. Any legislation that supports this, this is a legislation that is benefiting itself, as it's a kind of slavery. Why do people, when they enter in this society, they have to accept something? This is a crime. This is my point of view, knowing all the development of the history. So we have to change, because money has to be a good common, not only restricted to a few people, like to a few people. They are there behind the table saying, okay, the interests are higher, and then they screw everything. In our country, in other countries, it's a crime. We have to change. We can't speak of commons if we don't touch this wound. Many Charlie Brown has already taken a step here in my neighbor, like El Salvador has already taken some steps. So I needed to be bigger and not to be only a small group of people who create money as a debt. This is not nice. So that's it.
Obrigada, Ranulfo. Bom que a gente está aqui, né, criando outras formas, né, de se
We are
relacionar.
here creating other ways of relationships regarding the monetary system. I really thank you. It was really, really nice. I will bring a little bit of our conversation to Varman, to this cultural symposium. I really thank you for attending this symposium, so thank you.
Ah, o vídeo. Esqueci.
The video